like your small things that they do.
We are live now.
Sure. All right. Good evening. This is the Ways and Means Committee, 6 o'clock, Tuesday, March 16th. Semi-virtual as we're working our way back into live meetings. So half of us are here, half of us are on the screen in Zoom. So Nicole, you want to do roll call just to verify that we have a quorum, please?
Absolutely. Councilmember Buchanan?
Sure.
Okay, you guys are, I can hear, just so you guys know, I could hear Councilmember Pounds very well when he was, I don't know if he's right on the microphone or not, but just be mindful of how close you are to that because that might be helpful. Councilmember Streetman?
Here.
Councilmember Popson?
Here.
Councilmember Bell?
Here.
Councilmember Ward? You're on mute.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Moy?
Here.
Okay, Councilmember Smith?
Here.
Councilmember Pounds?
Here.
Mayor Carroll?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Order and acknowledge that the press and the public have been duly notified of the meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. Second item is approval of previous meeting minutes from our regular meeting of February 16th, 21. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any changes, edits, additions? Hearing none. Nicole?
Councilmember Streetman? I can't hear anybody.
All right.
Council,
You can
Council-
go ahead now, Nicole.
thank you. Councilmember Streetman? I'm not hearing him. Councilmember Popson? I don't hear anybody.
Okay.
We couldn't hear you, Nicole, but you can go ahead and now call the roll.
Okay.
call.
Councilmember Popson?
Aye.
Councilmember Streetman?
Aye.
Councilmember Buchanan?
Aye.
Councilmember Bell?
Aye.
Councilmember Ward? Says aye. Councilmember Moy? Says aye. Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Aye. I'm forgetting. Councilmember Buchanan?
Aye.
Councilmember Pounds?
Aye.
Mayor Carroll?
Aye.
All in favor? We can't hear city council.
I can hear Nicole, but I can't hear city council.
Exactly.
Can you hear us now?
Now you can, now we can hear you.
Yes,
Nicole, can you mute yourself?
Okay.
Thank you.
You have to mute the TV, otherwise the TV feeds back into the microphone.
go ahead.
All right, Devin.
Okay. So, we're just continuing some things that we've seen in prior months. On the revenue side, we're performing better than the COVID budget predicted overall. The hospitality tax, the county accommodations tax are both lower than predicted. Well, but we predicted the county accommodations tax wouldn't be collected this year, but hospitality tax is performing even worse than we had thought. Hopefully that will recover in the spring. Rental licenses are also down. They're beating budget, but down over the prior year. And the reason there is that the measurement period for the renewals included everything through June of last year. So it included March, April, and May that was impacted by COVID. So it makes sense that those renewal fees or a little less. General government revenues, you can see the current annual forecast looks good for almost all line items with the exception of parking. We're reducing the budget in the forecast due to the fact that we will have no paid parking on Palm. On the expenditure side, the forecast assumes we'll spend $4.5 million less than anticipated. The bulk of that is drainage phase 3. That accounts for 2.3 million of that swing. The public safety building coming in under budget by approximately 650,000, and 300,000 was budgeted for the refurbishment of a fire truck, and that is transitioned into purchase of a new truck in FY22. General fund expenditures are, I expect to be right at the budget by the end of the fiscal year. Two issues to talk about on the payroll side. Again, continuing the trend that we've talked about in the past, the fire department has had 3 long-term absences due to FMLA and workers' comp. Those shifts must be covered, and typically that's on an overtime basis. So their overtime is considerably over budget. Public Works is another area where we're going to exceed the budget, but that's not an operational issue. That is a budget issue. The budget predicted that a open position due to a retirement was going to exist for most of the months of FY21, but due to the demands on the department, that position had to be filled earlier than the budget anticipated. So that's what's causing that over budget condition in the Public Works Department. Again, that's a budget error, not an operational problem. Any questions on the first page? Moving on to cash balances. Total cash is 28 million at 228.21 compared to 21 million in the prior year. The biggest driver of that increase is, you know, that with the city closed on 2 bond issues, 4.5 million on the marina and 3.5 million on for drainage phase 3. Most of that cash is unspent, so it's driving that increase in cash. The LGIP rate is 0.1384%. And all the cash is invested there with the exception of 2.5 million at BB&T. That is a little above our $1 million target for local cash, but we had several big debt service payments due on 3/1, so we had to have money to cover those. On the fund balance side, you can see that we ended last year with a fund balance of 20,909,000. We're currently at 23,792, and the forecast, it says 6/30/21 budgeted fund balance, but that's actually forecasted will be 20,515,000. So pretty much flat fund balances through the end of this fiscal year. Current forecast does predict that the general fund revenues will exceed general fund expenses by approximately $390,000. That presumably would go to a combination of the capital projects fund and the disaster recovery fund to be determined after the audit. Moving on to the detail on the tourism revenues. You can see municipal accommodations fee and beach preservation fee. The trend continues that we're exceeding the prior year. So 34,025 for January. That's heads and beds in December, exceeds what we had December of 20. So before COVID started, we're still performing better. From July through January, we are 8% ahead of where we were in FY19. So 8% ahead of pre-COVID levels on accommodation taxes. That's good news. Next page, state accommodations tax, we received 2/4 of the 4 for the year and are 6% ahead of FY19. So 6% ahead of pre-COVID levels on state aid tax, which makes sense. It should mirror the trends in municipal accommodations tax. Charleston County tax pass-through is, there's no budget there, no collection. And no indications as of yet from the county that will change. Hospitality tax, we talked about how that continues to fall below even the pretty conservative budget. But the January results here are just slightly off of the prior year. So hopefully that is a trend that will continue for the final 4 months.
Deb, before you go too far and just for public purposes, could you state how much money year on year we're missing from the county accommodations tax? There's a perception that we're getting money from the counties that we're not getting. I think it's important to let people know what that is.
In FY19, the city received $508,000 from the county. And this relates to county accommodation taxes that they have historically passed through to the city, even though they are not required by law to do so. In FY20, the first payment for $370,000 was received, but then COVID hit and the second payment of FY20 was discontinued, and then no money in FY21.
So Deb, so it's county accommodations taxes that are collected here on the island,
Correct.
given to the county. And I'm just for clarification, that are not coming back to the city.
Well, the city doesn't give it to the county. The
Right.
county imposes their tax.
Right. No, I
prior to
understand.
the city,
Right.
imposing ours, but yeah.
Right.
Yes.
We're gonna skip beach preservation fee because it's a mirror of the tax, and then local option sales tax, my favorite. You can see that from August to January,
We lost you guys.
just highlight that we did have payout 13 to Trident Construction for $36,000. And some miscellaneous costs associated with moving back into the building. Still $985,000 below where we kind of budgeted to be. Next is marina dock replacement. The big stories here are the contracts and change orders received. You can see that we've reflected here the change orders that City Council has approved. We have the payout number 3 from Salmon Dredging and some ATM costs associated with bulkhead recoating and engineering and design. The remaining contingency on this project is $387,000. Drainage Phase 3, I just collapsed this schedule. It was getting kind of voluminous with repetitive Thomas and Hutton Engineering invoices, so I just collapsed it by fiscal year, but all these are Thomas and Hutton Engineering and design fees related to the projects identified at the top of the schedule. So 94,000 remaining on the engineering and design contract. And then the construction contract of 612 to Gulfstream Construction. I know work is ongoing, but we have not yet processed any invoices, which is why there's no spending showing on here. Anything else?
Debbie, thank you very much. I know Ron, we didn't put those on the screen, but it's in the packet that was put out for folks, but we'll have some other things that we'll share on screen here momentarily. Old business discussion and consideration of recommendations from the Public Works Committee to select the following Dominion Energy Non-Standard Service Fund projects for fiscal year 22. So why don't we have some discussion before we take a motion and vote on this? So I don't know, Jimmy or Desiree, who wants to give some background on this one?
I can go ahead and
Thank you.
give some background if that's okay with the Chair of Public Works. We're not seeing him on the screen, so I can't see if he's raising his hand or not.
Nobody is raising their hand currently.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and sort of give you all an update or some background on this project. This is something that the Public Works Committee has been talking for quite some time. How can the city make better use of the non-standard service fund that's provided by Dominion Energy? And it's a matching program where the city and Dominion Energy share the costs 50-50 of certain eligible projects, beautification, undergrounding utility lines. One very project that we're very proud of that the city used years ago with this program was the replacement of the lighting at Front Beach. So we went to Dominion Energy and asked them to make some recommendations of projects that would be eligible. And the Public Works Committee had some discussions about prioritizing those and making a recommendation to council to pursue the design, engineering, and construction of some of these projects in FY22. There was plenty of discussion during the committee meeting. We also had the Dominion Energy team attend the meeting in January and give some background on all of these projects and a little bit more of explanation of what it takes to underground utility lines. And as a result, the committee recommended to City Council, which is why it's in front of you now, for the city to pursue 3 of the 5 projects that were identified. And those are listed on your agenda, which is converting overhead to undergrounding those utility lines at the end of 41st Avenue, which is what would be inside or adjacent to the marina property, 21st Avenue and 14th Avenue. And you have the list of 5 projects in your packet, and included in there is a brief description and also an estimated cost. The next step in the process for council is to bless or agree to these projects. We've reached out to the Dominion Energy team to get a better understanding of next steps. And the next step would be for the city to enter into an agreement with Dominion Energy, basically saying we're going to pursue this project or these projects, and the city is going to pay for 50% of the cost. Then we would be the city would fund the engineering study. Because these are just estimates. They would have to design it and engineer it. And as a result of that, they would come up with a concrete construction estimate. And if the city at that point decides to move forward, the cost of the engineering study would be built into the construction or the 50% cost share that the city would be responsible for. They did indicate that they typically like working with one project at a time. Our Public Works Committee recommended 3 projects. So she was going to, Jennifer Hightower, she's our sort of point of contact with Dominion Energy. She was going to reach out to her team to determine whether it's feasible to pursue three, if the city wanted to allocate the 50% for all three projects. And she was gonna get back to me, but typically they just pursue one. And the timeline between entering into the agreement and having the engineering project completed, it's about 4 or 5 months. So that in and of itself, we're talking about 4 or 5 months. We're into the season. Depending the location of these projects, we would always, we typically try to avoid doing any work in the season so as not to disrupt, particularly with the marina, 21st Avenue, 14th Avenue. These are main commercial or, highly utilized and trafficked areas. So we'd have to take that into consideration. So just in a nutshell, council would have to approve the three, allocate funding, which would be done or could be done through the FY22 budget process, and would be expected to enter into an agreement with Dominion Energy before we move forward.
And Desiree, are these projects on our agenda listed in order of preference from the Public Works or not necessarily?
The motion was to pursue project 1, 3, and 4. So that's how they're listed. I don't know if the committee, Rusty, I'm sorry,
Yeah, but-
Councilmember Streetman.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I will, we didn't necessarily have them in a priority order. I think we did start off with 21st Avenue and 14th Avenue. And then through our discussion, we ended up saying, well, let's just add the marina as well, because it made sense from an aesthetic standpoint. And since, we don't have to go through the whole easement process, since the city owns that property as well. And, to just throw that into, and of course, we have that new pedestrian path that's going in down there, and that's right below those power lines. So we put City Marina in there as well, just for another option.
Okay.
But I think 14th and 21st and 14th was really our top two to begin with.
And then I know these original estimates from Dominion are pretty wide, obviously, but this is total cost, not just IOP portion, correct?
Correct. The estimated cost or total cost.
Thank
So half of it would be on the city.
Mayor?
Yes, sir. Can we make a motion so we can discuss it?
Sure.
So I'd like to make a motion that we proceed with these three projects for a total cost of $390,000. Desiree, our engineering is on top of this.
So the engineering costs, we don't have estimates on what that would be, but let's say it's $10,000. That's $10,000 that would it would be deducted from the city's 50%.
I'll second.
Thank you. So other questions, Susan? I see your hand.
Okay, I'm glad you can see me. Yeah, just to affirm what Rusty was saying, I think our intent was partly to pick those smaller projects and take care of those first, because we're just getting back started trying to do these things and thought that they would be doable. And then two, hoping for some flexibility with the marina project to make sure that the construction piece of that falls in a time when there isn't a lot of activity, when it's off season for the marina. So I think my hope was that if we kind of put that in this budget year, we could size it up and see what the best timing would shake out to be. So that was all I had to say, except for just a reminder that the $600,000 that in the fund includes a theoretical half contribution already, if you're going by the chart that we've been given in the past. So a theoretical contribution by the city of half is already factored into the $600,000 that Dominion has shared with us as being available, if that makes sense.
No, I was going to echo what Susan said regarding timing with the marina. So she covered it. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, discussion, comments?
Just one
Go ahead.
question.
Yep.
Given the information that Dominion Energy typically likes and supports just pursuing one project at a time,
Mhm.
does the city still want to budget 50% of all three projects and hope and pursue being able to do all three, with the understanding that it might be unlikely based on timing, and then just Dominion Energy's ability to get them completed.
Yeah, I think I would like to have another conversation with Dominion based on this vote tonight. And, you know, we've relied on them to help prioritize and identify projects. You know, I think we need to give them our concerns around the marina timing, and these other two are boy in the hotbed of all of our parking and infrastructure move arounds. So I think we have a conversation. We've got a little bit of time before we have to nail something down in the budget. So maybe we can have one or two more conversations with Dominion. I know Debbie's already got a placeholder in the budget for this, awaiting an amount of money. Yeah, I think the realistic expectation that we would get all three done in fiscal year 22 is pretty low. So again, unless somebody thinks different, let's have another Dominion conversation. We'll get to a budget workshop next week. We'll have another round or two of a budget draft before we get closer to the end of the year. That okay with folks?
That requires withdrawal of the motion.
No, you all
Yeah.
can still vote to support
Okay.
the three projects.
And then I think we prioritize based on conversation. Okay. Nicole, let's vote it, please.
Sure. Councilmember Streetman, Councilmember Streetman,
Aye.
Councilmember Popson.
Aye.
Councilmember Bell,
Aye.
Councilmember Buchanan,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Moy,
Aye.
Councilmember Ward. I don't see you or hear you, sir.
Aye.
Thank you. Mayor Carroll. Thank you. Councilmember Pounds.
Aye.
Thank you. All in favor?
Item is new business report on purchase of a Polaris Ranger Crew XP 1000 via grant in the amount of $19,223.89. Desiree?
This is just a report only, in accordance with our procurement code. Any purchases of over 15,000 that are not specifically in the budget need to be reported, but this was completely offset by a grant acquired by the police department.
Great. Thank you very much. Next item is item B, discussion of IOP revenue analysis. So Ron, if we can share this, that would be great. So this, Mr. Mayor, comes back to the spreadsheet that I know a lot of us have seen. Maybe everybody has showing the revenue by short-term rentals, second homes, primary residence. So that spreadsheet had a whole lot of numbers and a whole lot more assumptions built into creating those slides or create those numbers. Ron, if you go to the next page. So this is the spreadsheet that I think most of you are used to seeing. And again, it's very busy. It's just got a lot of numbers to it. So what I've tried to do in this presentation is take it down to kind of just the numbers that matter, if you will, between primary residence, second homes, and short-term rentals. So Ron, if you go to the next slide. So this first one, starting on the right-hand side, current parcel count in IOP, full-time is 1,624, second home is 1,173, short-term rental is 1,622. So when Debbie first created this spreadsheet in 2019, the numbers have moved just a little bit. So you can see on the right-hand side, the pie chart is 37% full-time, 37% short-term rentals, and 26% second homes. And since the first time we did this, so full-time parcels have increased by 57, short-term rentals have increased by 80, and second homes have decreased by a count of 151. Now, I've had a number of conversations with some of the rental community here, and I know one of our assumptions the last time we all had this conversation was houses are coming off the short-term rental market. You know, this would tell you it's not, but I think what may be happening is some of these increased by 80 are not necessarily active, or houses that have turned over from an ownership standpoint may still have a rental license, but are not necessarily active in the rental market at the moment. Because I don't think there's any, I think as you talk to rental management companies on the island, there is no doubt inventory is down from where it's been in the past. So, and I think Mayor, we've had that conversation as well. So again, I'm just reporting the numbers at this point. We haven't had time to necessarily dig into the short-term rental, 1,622, to see how many are active, how many are, having revenue come across or not. So Ron, if you go to the next slide. So this slide gives you, this is total annual revenue per parcel. So again, just trying to break it down to bite-sized pieces, if you will. So on an annual basis, what we get from a full-time resident parcel is $2,181. Second home, $2,223, short-term rental, $5,344. So again, a lot of assumptions are used to get to these numbers. And in our short-term rental revenue number is included hotels. So it definitely skews it at this point. We have not had time to dig into, carving out Wild Dunes hotel or carving out the Palms or such. So a little bit skewed, but again, these are directional conversations and directional numbers to give you some feel for where we sit. Question?
No, just a quick, clearly the new hotel wouldn't be in this.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's
so,
correct.
yeah.
Yeah. So again, think about, this is revenue on an annualized basis from 2016 for 5 years. So we're definitely looking backwards. And again, just to give you a bite-sized piece of what each type of parcel would represent for us. If that makes sense.
Philip,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
have a question with Susan.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
Susan.
Thank you. So when you talk about the hotel, are you including the hotel that the Boardwalk Inn as one unit in the short-term rental, or is that multiple like you're counting each room in the hotel?
No. So on this slide, this is just looking at revenue. So a hotel would be counted as one unit, if you will.
Okay.
So the revenue is definitely skewed
Okay.
because it's including, 99 rooms from the Boardwalk Inn currently to create that type of a revenue number. So
Okay. That makes
Jimmy
sense.
Ward?
Okay, can you hear me? What exactly is annual revenue?
All forms of revenue to the city, just divided out per parcel. So this is everything that comes into the city, excluding, you can see on the left-hand side, marina and parking revenues. So accommodations tax, local option sales tax, any type of revenue coming into the city, Jimmy.
So you mean a full-time resident that doesn't rent out his residence at all, or as a second home, it's just his principal residence, that his revenue from that property is $2,181, the city's portion, or is that the county's portion also?
This is total revenue. We'll look at just property tax picture in just 1 second.
So the answer is,
Say it again, Jimmy.
so the answer is what?
Because this is total revenue, and I'll look at property tax, the ILP only property tax piece will be the next slide, but this is total and complete revenue for the last 5 years, annualized for the city.
Okay, I'd be interested in seeing that total because I know I don't pay that much.
It's not property tax, it's more than property tax.
I know, it's annual revenue. I'd
Mayor-
like to see what that is. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just looking at, dividing the short-term rentals and second home. And it really represents about 72% of our income. So I mean, it's the goose that lays the golden egg for their residents of Isle Palms.
Randy?
Yeah, I was just going to say clearly, if you extracted the hotel revenue from the short-term rental revenue, that number would dramatically decrease. And I think the surprise in the numbers maybe for me is the revenue contribution of true short-term rentals versus hotels is probably significantly lower than we would have expected.
Would agree. Yeah, and I think, depending on tonight's conversation, we'll keep digging with Wild Dunes, because right now we get one lump number from Wild Dunes Resort, if you will. Doesn't break out the Boardwalk Inn, and in the future, Randy, to your question, it won't break out, the new hotel as well, but we're working with their controller to get broken out numbers, if you, yeah. So to Jimmy Ward's question, let's go to the next slide real quick. So again, that was total revenue. This particular slide is just the property tax, just the IOP portion on an annual basis. So full-time resident, just short of $900, second home, 925, short-term rental, 1,018. And you can see on the left-hand side, total residential parcels on the island are 4,419. Of those, 2,795 or 6% residential property. So we backed out or carved out, if you will, any business, commercial properties that are on the island, just looking at the residential piece of this. So Jimmy Ward, I don't know if this helps, but again, this is just the IOP portion of property tax, where before was everything, every stream of revenue into the city.
Yeah, that helps. That gets to the IOP portion, but I want to see how that reconciles with the previous slide. But we'll get into that later.
Okay. Yeah. So like I say, this, sorry, Ron. So this particular slide is a subset of the slide before it. Total revenue versus just the property tax. Let's go last slide if there's not another question yet. So I know this is going to be quite obvious to most, if not everybody, but this kind of gives you a feel for, Mayor, to your comment, who's paying a lion's share of life here. And what I tried to do is pick the revenue types that are specific to the individual properties, parcels, if you will. And you can see how it builds on the short-term rental side when you're including rental license fees, muni A tax, state A tax, beach preservation money. So you can really see, so that total of that high bar chart on short-term rentals is $3,872. So that's pretty significant contribution from those folks. Again, it's got hotel revenue in here, so we don't have that backed out, but directionally, it's going to be something much more significant, obviously, than a full-time parcel or a second home. Thoughts or questions around that so far? So next slide, Ron. So to me, we could spend a lot more time, and Debbie and I will spend some more time trying to get the hotel revenue broken out, continue to refine these numbers, and we could spend probably the rest of Debbie's career beating a spreadsheet to death. But to me, the conversation really becomes, these are directional numbers. I wouldn't put, my stamp on them as absolute accurate at this point, but they are absolutely directional from parcel counts and revenue numbers, and how it breaks out. To me, the real question becomes, what do you want the island to look like in 5, 10, or 20 years? And are there decisions that you might make today to help drive those numbers one way or the other? If you wanted a more residential island, that would take you down a very different path from how you might spend PR money. Think the CVB, you might take a totally different, if you said, we want to have a full-time residential island or more of a skew there, what would you be doing today to do that? That would be different advertising. That might be different businesses and amenities on the island that you would look at. And I'm not suggesting anything other than all these numbers do to me is say, okay, then what? What do we want the island to look like somewhere down the road? And if we're okay with the mix and how things look, because the numbers have moved a little bit, Mayor, since we first put this spreadsheet together, as far as short-term rentals or second homes. But are there other things we might want to be doing if you wanted a different desired state in some time period down the road in the future? Randy?
Without opening a total can of worms, you look at this and you look on any given day driving down Palm now, there's an old house torn down and replaced with something. When you look at age demographics on the island, and all of this is historical perspective 5 years back, right? So I'm looking at it now, I'm saying we're going to have a new hotel in Wild Dunes. We have median age in Wild Dunes is in the mid 60s. It's in the mid 50s for the island. I think the question we have to ask, and there's no definitive answer to this, is what does that mean given the increasing property values on the island and the overall affordability of the island in terms of being a residential community or being something else? And how does that factor any strategic planning? Because, we're getting to a point where, all of us know the price values. I use price values as a term, the price, maybe not the value, of getting property on the island is excessive at the moment. And it's going to change the strategic view of where this island has to look over the next 5 to 10 years. Jimmy?
Mayor.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to be the chair, but he's got way more real estate knowledge than I do.
Let me say it. Mayor, go ahead.
Chair, thank you, Randy, good point. I kind of look at Mount Pleasant, Old Village of Mount Pleasant. The
Yeah.
Little houses in the Old Village of Mount Pleasant cost as much as our ranch style houses on the Isle of Palm. So it's going up everywhere. But what I'm surprised, and I've been doing real estate for 43 years now in Isle of Palms, I'm seeing more and more houses being built. And a previous council before my time limited the number of vacationers in the house to 12. That was one of the smartest things city council ever did. Because people buying these big lots and building bigger houses are limited to a number of 12 people. Sometimes it's really just not worth for them to put it on the rental market. And Ryan's in the building business. I mean, he sees it all the time. He's working on these houses. So again, I congratulate the previous council for limiting the number of people, maximizing, fit 12. So I think, yes, we're seeing more rentals in the interior of Alphonse we've ever seen before. That might be something we might look down the road. But otherwise, I think I do congratulate previous councils for going that direction.
Yeah. Thank you, Mayor. And again, there's not anything to do with this information tonight, other than just kind of take it in. And we've talked about it for the last 4, 5, 6 months around this spreadsheet and, what does it look like and what happens if our revenue, what happens to our revenue if short-term rentals become higher. I mean, it's kind of obvious what happens, but again, to me, it's more of a futuristic conversation to think, kind of Randy, to your point, what do you want it to be? And are there decisions today that we might want to make that might help skew some of those numbers? Susan, question?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. One is that I'm hopeful that we can continue to preserve the strong residential community that we have within this dynamic. But I think it's also excellent information and really reveals the degree to which our quality of life as residents is enhanced by the accommodations taxes and different taxes that are pulled in through the short-term rentals. And also just to point out, I think we all know though, that things are really dynamic right now because of COVID has, I think, increased demand in a variety of ways for property, whether it's somebody once seeing the opportunity to rent or somebody seeing the opportunity to live here where they may have felt like they had to live in a different part of the country for their job. And there's just a lot more flexibility right now. And so there's just, I suspect it'll be really interesting to see how post-COVID, all these dynamics change, and maybe we wind up with the same balance, but at the end of the day, there's just a lot of demand to be on the island.
Final thoughts?
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Rusty?
Yeah, just to echo a little bit of what Councilmember Smith said. We all know that Isle of Palms continues to be a destination for people that are relocating from elsewhere. And just myself, I had some friends that are in the real estate business in the upstate called me a couple of nights ago, and they had a client that was from New York originally and wanted to look at Isle of Palms property. So, you got those kind of things going on too. So I think we're going to always be an attractive destination for anyone for a second home. And to the mayor's point, I think also too, by limiting the short-term rental numbers, a number of people that can stay there, I think that's a real plus for us as well. So I think the future looks great. I like the analysis you did initially, but we got a lot more discussion we need to do about that in the future.
Desiree, any comment?
No, I think it's a great directional conversation and one information that really should drive policymaking from your perspective to ensure that the city is mirroring whatever vision city council sets for this community. I think that this is perfect information to use as part of the strategic planning process when we look at the next 5, 10, 20 years. What do you all as elected officials representing government in this community want the community to look like? It was validating in a way to see that the third sort of composition remains. There may be some years where that changes a little bit, but I think it really should be driving a conversation. What happens if we see an opposite direction from short-term rentals? What would the impact of that be on full-time owners or second home owners? And having that, in the back of our minds to prepare for those potential circumstances in the future.
Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. I think one of the things also we're looking at the big houses and limiting them to the 12. But I think one of the biggest things that we did is a council recently, like past couple of years, is we went through and changed the FEMA regulations and allowed a lot of these smaller homes to be renovated. Instead of, at the time, people would buy a home, they couldn't renovate it. So what they had to do was tear it down. They couldn't invest into it. And I think, I'm not going to call Douglas out on this, but I have seen a number of homes, even small, old JC long cinder block homes, 800 square foot homes being renovated and lived in.
Yeah.
And so there are a number of projects like that throughout the island now that would normally, those homes would have been torn down in either a large short-term rental home being put in its place, but now people are moving into those and renovate them. And it's not only is it good for the residents and community, but it's a wonderful solution for our drainage infrastructure when you're not filling those lots with homes as well.
Good point. Yeah, thank you. All right, we'll keep moving then. Item 6C, discussion of business license standardization. There's been a fair amount of press in this, and if you're plugged into MASC, there's been a fair amount of newsletters and informational sessions. So Desiree, you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Just like you said, y'all have been receiving information from MASC. This is something that we're preparing to do. We've been working on it for the past several months. Last year, the General Assembly voted on the Business License Standardization Act, which basically establishes this whole standard requirements for businesses all over the state. And the effort is to create efficiencies and just have a one-stop shop for all businesses doing business license renewals. The new requirements that have been established by this new law need to go into effect in January 1st, 2022. So we're in the process of transitioning into that. And I'll just highlight some of the things that the new law changes that we'll have to work through internally here, just as any other municipality in the state will have to do. The business license period would have to be consistent all across the state. And the business license period will be between May 1st and April 30th. Currently, we have 2 licenses. We have the business license, the regular business license. That reporting period is January 1st to December 31st, so that would have to change. And for short-term rentals, we have a different period, which is July 1st to June 30th. So that would also have to change to the May 1st and April 30th time period. The city would have to calculate the tax base on a business gross income from the previous calendar year or the previous fiscal year. So that'll be up to the business to determine if they want to report on the previous 12 months or a fiscal year or calendar year. The city would have to accept the standard application, and that's something that MASC has developed and created, and that'll be, again, across the board. It changes the definition of gross income and will allow businesses to make renewal payments through an online portal that's going to be hosted by both MASC and the Department of Revenue. And the city would also have to set the rates for the 2022 license year to prevent any revenue windfall. So MASC has been very helpful. They've developed a step-by-step process to help municipalities make the transition. We have been fortunate enough to be picked by MASC for them to actually do the rebalancing. portion of this work, which looks at all of our rates and converts them into the new rates to ensure that it's revenue neutral and we don't have a revenue windfall for the first year. There are a few other things that the city needs to do internally, operationally, to get ready to that point, and that's what we've been working on. MASC has also developed a model ordinance that's been fully vetted by their attorneys. They've sought feedback from municipalities, and their recommendation is that the city, every municipality, completely repeal their previous business license and adopt this new ordinance, the business license ordinance, and adopt this one, just to ensure that you're not, picking and choosing, and you're doing it comprehensively and including all of the new requirements. So once we get done through some of the operational changes, which includes this new rebalancing of the class rate structure, we'll be getting a copy of the model ordinance, and we'll be presenting that to you all for consideration or approval. So we have a lot of questions. We have been meeting at length, Debbie, Douglas, and I, to make sure that we understand what this is going to mean for the city. This will be a significant change moving forward for all businesses because the renewal process will be different. But the goal is that it'll be a lot easier. So as a business, rather than going to each individual municipality where they operate and having their own license, different due dates, different reporting periods, this should really streamline, and they would only be doing it once. But obviously within any transition, it's going to be tricky. So we want to make sure that we have everything that we understand. We do it with enough time to make sure that we start communicating that to our business community and get them ready for this transition.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all thought this in the very beginning, but in the long run, it's really going to be to streamline. The first year is going to be a beer. There's no doubt about it. We're going to prorate half the year, and then starting at the beginning of the year. But in the long run, it will streamline itself.
Kevin.
Any idea, Desiree, what these changes that we're being asked to make are going to cost the city, if anything? Any idea?
Added expense to the city. The only thing that I would say is that our current staff in the building planning department have been used to a staggered period where they deal with short-term rentals one period and then regular business license in a different period. And that's been very helpful to balance the workload. This is now going to be all done together. So for the first year, we do anticipate needing some part-time or temporary work to help get through that. But the hope and the goal is that the renewal process will now be handled through this online portal and that it should streamline the process moving forward. But we do anticipate some challenges and some growing pains, if you will, during this transition period. And we may need some additional assistance and resources for the department, which, I would absolutely support and expect that you all would too.
Randy, I'm come back to you. Jimmy Ward.
A question for Desiree. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the year-end date is April. Is that right or not?
The license period will be May 1st through April 30th, and the
Okay,
due
when would
date
be
will be April
is the
30th.
state, right? So is the state, are they telling us when the due date would be, or is that up to us? And if they are
Yes, the
telling
due
us,
date is
what
also
is it?
established by the act. Douglas, I'm looking at you. Yeah, it's,
it is established by the state.
yes, sir.
When is the due date? I hadn't had a chance to look at it.
Could you repeat your question?
When is the due date for the license fee?
Currently, it's May 1st.
You mean the year end is April 30th and the due date is May 1st?
I'm sorry, April 30th would be the due date.
But that's the year end, right?
That they have a choice of either choosing the fiscal year of their business or the calendar year. What he says.
Hello?
Yeah. Douglas is given a sidebar here.
No, I don't think I understand the question.
The question is, the year end is April 30th. When is the due date for the tax?
So,
Or
so Jimmy,
license
the
fee.
due date is May 1st, but they are going to be reporting on the revenue that they made in either the calendar year or the business's fiscal year, and that is the choice of the business.
So it's very similar to what we have now.
For business licenses, that's correct. For rental licenses.
Right,
it's
right.
skewed by
But
half
for
a year.
business licenses, it's very, very similar to what we have now.
That is correct.
All right, thank you.
Yep, Randy.
Yeah, hopefully oversimplifying might not be an answer yet, but does this change anything in the auditability portion of gross revenue by having the online records? Because Douglas, correct me if I'm wrong. Now we take the word of the business, like year one is an estimated business for the business license fee in terms of revenue, and subsequent years are literally what a business tells the city that they are reporting, right? I don't believe there's any auditability in this. Does this intent change any of that where it's supported by tax records or something? Desiree's shaking her head.
I'm shaking my head because it's still,
We have the ability, but we don't, correct? Yeah. Yeah.
It'll be the same.
We've been talking about compliance for years, Randy, and
There was a time
we just
when-
never have gotten very far with it.
Some auditing through the county.
Douglas.
That portion doesn't change.
Yeah, what I'm getting at is having this online ought to help your record keeping and ability to audit should we choose to, because it removes a layer of record keeping for us, I would presume.
no, it's still self-reporting. So they are still entering what their gross,
It's just the license issue.
But they're entering into an online system that is going to store historical data for these businesses.
we're doing that now.
Okay,
Because we take the business license application and import that data into our BSNA system. So, but it doesn't remove the city's ability to conduct audits through the Business License Act. Anyway, so that doesn't change.
Ryan. Yep, no, okay. Hey, Jimmy Ward, you were saying something, we could not get that.
It's fine, thank you.
Okay. Other questions, comments? Desiree, Douglas?
No, more to come.
Yeah.
We are, working diligently on this. MASC has been very helpful and they'll continue to assist us. So just be on the lookout. We'll be presenting that model ordinance to City Council for ratification shortly. As soon as we get to a point where we can start advertising and notifying all businesses. But this is something that they're going to expect in every municipality.
Yeah.
So bottom line is it's going to be a little tricky the first year,
Yeah.
but it should be very efficient and a lot easier for the business conducting the work moving forward.
Yeah.
So I
Certainly
think they'll
business-
appreciate that.
Businesses that are all over the state, without a doubt. Ryan?
Correct, and I agree. Not that I, enjoy centralization of governments. This will make it, I think it's better because it obviously, for me, in the work that I do,
Yeah.
I don't have to buy 14 different licenses throughout the area. And this is no cost to the city, from what I understand, correct? So it is MASC and DOR are basically running this. They collect all the funds, whether I'm paying for 6 business licenses and then distribute those accordingly to those municipalities.
Yeah. I mean, I think our cost is in the temp labor,
Just-
but to your
Yeah,
point,
right.
drafting an ordinance
Yep.
and putting a website up, none of
Yep.
that's us, you're right.
Right.
Yeah. Jimmy Ward.
Yes, sir, thank you. I think it would be incumbent upon the city to notify the rental companies as soon as we can, because this is going to be a change for cash flow. Several years back, I made a motion to change the business license due date to April 30th because of the businesses having, it used to be due January 31st, and it was rough on them in the winter. And I think the rental company is going to have a rough time if they have to come up with a big business license check on April 30th, where they've been used to paying in the summer. So just a suggestion to let them know that this is coming down so that they can do cash flow projections. So maybe it won't hurt them so bad. The businesses are going to be, from what I hear, exactly the same. So they won't be affected. And I think it should be very little work and problems for the city. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. And I think, part of the project, not to speak for you guys, I mean, it's certainly a communication with our business community without a doubt, Jimmy. All right, good conversation. Thank you. Last item under new business is discussion and consideration of July 4th fireworks show. So I guess before a motion, do we want to have a conversation around this and an update from public safety or?
Yeah.
Randy, go ahead.
Yeah, Public Safety Committee met on this and had a discussion. Really, there were two parts of it. One was the finances around, I think we had a budget line item of around $35,000 for fireworks. We didn't do it last year. That money was distributed back out to employees last year, so there's no discussion going forward of that. It's simply a discussion, is it prudent given where we are with COVID? A large portion of the conversation, we actually talked about the tide tables and how much beach would be available, and the whole safety element, and the fact that we're not through the COVID pandemic yet. And it requires virtually 100% of city staff to be participants in order for us to pull this off. And the Public Safety Committee voted unanimously that we think we should hold off this year and not move forward with the fireworks, given where we still are, and the fact that we didn't want to impose on any employees, particularly of the city, of necessarily having to participate in something that has a potential for the spread of COVID still.
Randy,
Desiree, anything to add?
All right. Why don't you make that in the form of a motion? Let's get a second. Then we can.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we do not do the fireworks for this current calendar year.
Thank you.
Second.
Yeah, just two pieces of information that were asked of us at the public safety meeting that we did not have readily available at that time. One was what were other communities going to do? I reached out to my counterparts at Folly, Sullivan's, and Town of Kiowa. The Town of Kiowa doesn't put a fireworks show. The resort does, and they have not yet submitted a request for a special event yet. So we don't know whether Kiowa will have one or not. Sullivan's Island canceled theirs for 4th of July this year again, and will do them at the end of the year as part of their holiday celebration, which is what they did last year. I think they enjoyed doing that, and will do that again this year. And the town of Folly Beach, city of Folly Beach, they haven't made a final decision yet, but according to the administrator, they're on track to be canceled. I wanted to share that with you all. And then the other question was the total fully loaded cost, if you will, of the event on the city for that weekend. And like you correctly stated, the city has $35,000 budgeted in the FY22. About 25 to 27,000 are specifically for the fireworks show. There's some added costs associated to incidentals. In 2018, the total cost for the fireworks show was $45,000, so $10,000 over the $35,000, and that includes additional police, additional fire, public works, to be able to support that weekend. So just as even if we don't do the fireworks, there will be additional cost to the city, because it'll likely be a busy weekend and we'll need extra support to be able to safely provide services for visitors and residents. So, there's still an expense component to that weekend that the city will have to do regardless, but certainly not $45,000 worth of expenses.
Ryan?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And I look at it in the fact that just the amount, we're going to have one of our busiest years, I believe, that we've seen in a long time. I think just the fact that everybody's trying to get out, and we're seeing it now in our reservations and the way everything's trending and moving forward with occupancy rates out here. And I just don't know. It's obviously a couple weekends ago when we had our first good day, And even this past week, when it was cloudy, it was still difficult to get off the island. And the amount of extra personnel that we're gonna need that we don't have, and that we're gonna be relying on Charleston County, that we're not getting their money from. I mean, not getting our money back from them, we're still missing $500,000 from them that they're not gonna pay, that was owed to us. So, I don't think, like I said, it's probably not just the money, but I think a lot of it has to do with the personnel and the stress of the personnel in on the city itself.
Susan.
Yeah.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And to chime in on both, it's expensive, the money, and maybe we need to step back in the future and have a conversation about, what our goals are around having the show. In addition to it costing $35,000 to $45,000, we also wind up with gridlock traffic a lot of times. I mean, that time of year is not necessarily a time when we need to be drawing more people into the island. But, the other pieces of the conversation that people don't really talk about that much is the fireworks show pumps a lot of trash into the ocean and onto the beach. And it's something that we should, maybe consider. And it's also disruptive to animals. There's a lot of people who are dog owners can attest that it's a stressful night for their dogs. And actually the animal shelter will tell you that a lot of animals wind up escaping from their fences and become show up at the shelter. They see a bump in the number of animals who wind up becoming strays as a result. So there are a lot of drawbacks, but if you do continue with a celebration, it might be worth considering doing something more like what Sullivan's does and postponing it until later in the year.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy Ward.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
One final thought that's on this, but it may not, maybe it hit many council members, but it hit me. And that was Rusty Streetman's photograph of the connector last weekend. And that was just, did y'all see that? And the connector is, we all know it, it's a mess. It's not straightened out. And I can't imagine what it'd be like July 4th until South Carolina Department of Transportation gets it fixed. But there was people all over those lanes. Did anybody, I'd like to hear if anybody, show of hands, saw that photograph that Rusty took.
Yeah, let's,
I was stuck in it.
let's.
Can you
to
imagine,
the topic at hand.
Mr.
Let's
Chairman,
vote on
what it's
this.
gonna be like?
Other comments or questions? Rusty.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just full disclosure, Councilman Ward, I did not personally make that photograph. I actually saw it on social media, and I wish I had gotten the name of the person who posted it, but it was certainly something that a number of people came back and said they observed similar type activity going on, and it definitely was a very potentially dangerous situation for
So you see my
pedestrians
point.
or cyclists. And of course, we didn't have many of those on the connector at the time, which is a good thing that they weren't, but driving recklessly and dangerously was certainly the case last weekend.
All right, Nicole, you want a roll call vote? As we have a motion on the table to, a motion and a second to not.
Have the fireworks show.
I would recommend it should be
Sorry.
made in the positive, so the fireworks shall be canceled.
I will make a
Correct.
motion that the fireworks shall be canceled for this calendar year.
Okay,
All right, Nicole, sorry.
no problem. Councilmember Ward,
Aye.
Councilmember Moy,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Popson,
Aye.
Councilmember Streetman, Councilmember Buchanan,
I
Councilmember Bell, Mayor Carroll.
Aye.
Councilmember Pounds.
Aye.
All in favor?
Thank you. So we have two meetings coming up next. Our workshop is scheduled for Thursday, March 25th at 4 o'clock at the Rec Center. Thank you, Norma Jean. Meeting is Tuesday, April 20th, 6:00, hopefully back here in the chambers. So motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Off record at 7:14.
Good meeting.